We slapped an experimental head rig on his head and said, "Now, be the star of this movie."
The actors behind the Na'vi and avatars dealt with long days, limited vision, and heavily wired motion capture suits.
There was a lot of work, a lot of body work, and a lot of behavioral work that I had to do.
Long before filming started, the cast were brought into the studio for a long and tiresome, full-body casting experience. In order to make these life-sized models, the actors had to sit with restrictive plastic wrap all over their face while layers of plaster cast were applied, all while unable to see, smell, or breathe very well. And this was just the beginning of the process. While the cast had to suffer through the arduous ordeal, it was a major help to the creative team who needed the molds to create highly detailed scans to send along to the designers, that were then able to create the incredible transformation from human to Na'vi or avatar, all while keeping each character visually comparable to the actor playing them.
The idea that I had clung to for a long time was this idea of mounting a camera directly to the actor's head.
Those full-body casts came in handy when it came time to make specially fitted head rigs that the actors had to wear throughout their entire performance.
So we wound up with a tight-fitting carbon fiber helmet.
This headgear was heavy-duty, a kind of cross between a skull cap and a helmet that were made to fit like skin on the actors' heads so they could keep all the mocap markers steady. These caps weren't easy to wear since they had all sorts of gear attached, like wires, cat-like ears, and even motion capture-ready hair. Not to mention the carbon fiber arm with a tiny but powerful camera on the end of it that reached around to the front of the actor's face. While the addition of the camera was necessary to capture the nuances of the performer's facial movements and expressions, it could make actually performing challenging, as a camera in front of the face could obstruct views and get in the performer's way. Fortunately, the actors managed to brave through and performed with no bounds. The result is pretty incredible, 100% committed performances. The mocap suits used in Avatar truly became like second skins for the actor, though they weren't always the most comfortable skins. There is nothing natural feeling about a full-body, form-fitting suit kitted up with wires and heavy battery packs.
You've got a bunch of markers on the actor's body that are being picked up by hundreds of cameras.
Very little time was spent in the makeup chair, as all that had to be applied to the face were dots for the motion capture. And the wardrobe department was really just the motion capture suit department. With the distraction of all these technical-looking suits, cameras, and wires everywhere an actor turned, the one thing they could keep a clear focus on was each other's eyes, since those were never covered. Having that connection amidst all the technology was key and a definite motivator to help the actors through when filming felt tough.
On top of the actress's photograph, then we would turn her into a Na'vi.
On top of the body casts, the team decided to obtain as much visual reference as they could of each cast member. In the development process, each of the actors were brought in for a special photo shoot, one that involved a giant sphere filled with large, bright lights and multiple cameras surrounding inside the sphere. The actors were troopers through the process to help the designers gather as much detail about their physicality and facial details. The photo shoots didn't end in the sphere, though. An incredible amount of photos were taken while the actors performed various activities, including archery and wacky facial expressions. As Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington found themselves running through the jungles of Hawaii, they definitely experienced the elements. Maybe a bit too intensely for their liking.
I was naked for 3 days in Hawaii.
Since James Cameron wanted the actors to experience these filming experiments as their characters, he had them in the actual clothing their characters would wear, and that didn't consist of much.
Did a couple of scenes and we ran around in loincloth.
The fact caught the actors by surprise, as it never really occurred to them just how minimal their actual costumes were. Not an easy experience, but we have a feeling Saldana and Worthington were very close after enduring that together. If you haven't gathered by now, the preparation to bring Avatar to the screen was long and intense. But it did include a trip to Hawaii to explore and film in Kauai amongst the mountains and through the jungles. An incredible experience, but this wasn't a vacation. This was work, which meant everyone had to deal with the very real rainforest elements, just as their characters would have had to. The performers were even set up with costume details like their tails and their characters' accessories. While Saldana got to ditch the motion capture suit for this, she did need to wear what her character would have. And if you've seen Avatar, you know it's not very much. This became especially tough on the days when the weather wasn't so great and the performers were facing all the elements.
Keep going. You got it, Sam. Let's go.
Every actor had to go through a very intense training regimen before they could even begin filming. Sam Worthington went through extensive boxing and military training, even getting the chance to work with a former Marine who just happened to be James Cameron's brother, John David Cameron. Worthington had to be confident enough in his training to be able to give a full performance while restricted by the motion capture suit and helmet, and he definitely delivered. Zoe Saldana pretty much became an expert at performing highly demanding physical activities while wearing her full-body performance suit, long hair on the cap included. The actress had to learn how to shoot a bow and arrow both the human way and the Na'vi way, left-handed and with their hands reversed. While this was supernatural for the Na'vi, it was far from simple for the performers, and the fact that they were wearing their full motion capture suits and headgear only added a layer of difficulty and discomfort. The training was rigorous. 2 Olympic team trainers were there to whip the cast into shape, and from what we see in the movie, they didn't disappoint.
I had to take everything I learned in training and apply it to my first day.
Laz Alonso, aka Sute, trained so much that he was able to ride a horse with speed and jump off, all while looking graceful. This was vital since he really was riding a horse when filming, and while in his wire and battery pack covered suit. These feats weren't just difficult, but dangerous as well. Wearing the headgear meant the performer's view could be obstructed by the camera in front, which is the last thing a person would want riding a horse. The high-tech suits also spent some time climbing up a model built in the studio to represent the beanstalk. The performers were attached to wires with heavy sandbags at the ends, enabling the actors to speedily scale their way up, translating to the animalistic, otherworldly movement we see on screen. As for the scenes when the characters are soaring through the air,
When you see them flying these things, they are working hard.
are we surprised? The day after filming these rigorous scenes was always a tough one and left the actors physically exhausted, not to mention overwhelmed by their second skin suits. As for the large group scenes, Terry Notary was brought in to lead the actors through movement workshops and training, a rigorous process that was key for the success of the film. Hours were spent becoming fluent in the Na'vi physicality so they could all suit up and perform massive dances like this. Just seeing all the tech the performers had to wear is overwhelming. Avatar is a feast for the eyes and truly a triumph for filmmaking.
Jim was like, come on, Neytiri, suck it up. I'm like, right, okay, Zoe, leave. This is jungle, no TV, no Blackberry.
The Avatar movies might be all CGI, but these actors perform every single stunt, wear elaborate costumes, and work with professional trainers to make sure they can run, jump, fight, and even hold their breath for over 7 minutes. We've got a lot to talk about here.
That's great. Hold on now, don't take it easy. Don't get ahead of yourself, okay?
Number 1. Director James Cameron always goes for authenticity, even if it's incredibly dangerous to shoot. It wasn't enough for the actors to voice CGI characters that were underwater. They actually had to be able to do it themselves. Kate Winslet managed to hold her breath for 7 minutes and 14 seconds. It was brilliant, and I was very proud of myself, and I'll probably never be able to do it again. That came at the end of 4 weeks worth of quite intense training.
Most challenging for me was to physically play a 14-year-old girl.
Number 2. She really went through the ringer for this film. Being a 72-year-old actor didn't hold her back from doing the same rigorous training as every other actor in this film. She and the rest of her castmates had to unlearn a lot of normal human behaviors while swimming underwater for long periods of time. Sometimes their shoots would have them submerged in water for over 12 hours, learning how to not squint or clamp their mouth shut. Both natural reactions when you're submerged. During take after take in a gigantic water tank, she had to have the professional divers speed her back to the surface for air, just in case she wasn't able to make it up fast enough. Number 3. Imagine being held down underwater with weights around your waist. Not only did the actors have to be trained on holding their breath, but they also had to make sure they stayed submerged. That's where the weights come into play. Sam Worthington really struggled with filming underwater, mostly due to his own fear. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. You're dealing with the restrictions of free diving, the constraints of motion capture underwater, and you're trying to keep an emotional journey going while you're innately struggling with the fear of dying.
It's how do you do emotion underwater without, how do you not look like a blowfish?
Number 4. We know the actors pretty much do it all.
Mocap ready.
And action!
Every major stunt that you see on camera was performed by the actors themselves.
They had to run, they had to leap, they had to fight, they had to do all the things that you see them doing in the film.
Considering that the actors were also clad in painful CGI suits and head rigs, they definitely left the shoot every day incredibly sore. Just look at these massive leaps Zoe Saldana had to do.
One of the things that I'm always going to take with me is the fact that I was a part of a revolutionary experience in Hollywood.
Number 5. Just another part of the brutal physical training the actors had to go through.
When you hold a bow, you have to kind of like, hold it this way, but the Na'vi hold it that way.
The rigorous hours of training in such an odd way left the actors' hands and arms super cramped and sore afterward.
That was one of the biggest things we had to work with for her, is how to shoot this bow and arrow.
Another dangerous aspect, besides just generally dealing with weapons, was you need to have perfect aim so you don't hit something you're not supposed to. Luckily for Zoe Saldana,
I have really good aim.
But her downfall after so many hours of practice is,
I can only shoot like a Na'vi. I cannot do archery like a human. Go figure.
Number 6. Yes, they got to ride actual horses on set, but it wasn't easy. They had to do tons of training in order to be able to ride bareback and manage the horses properly. Also, because the headgear they were wearing, they didn't always have a perfect peripheral view. Not great when you're riding a live animal. We also can't forget about Sam Worthington's stunt where he takes a hard fall off his horse.
Say where to go.
Forward.
Ouch, that definitely had to hurt. Number 7. There's a lot of hand-to-hand combat in these movies. This type of martial arts the actors had to learn was called wushu,
which is a very graceful form of martial arts that I grew up to like after I trained.
The actors had to do months of intense training, pushing through all the aches and pains that came with the learning of a new physical skill. Number 8. Anytime an actual weapon is on set always creates an element of danger. Luckily for the cast, they had military trainers to help prepare them to work with their weapon of choice.
They want you to kind of be proficient with weaponry and stuff like that because the guys in the ring.
Sam Worthington had to be super prepped in his military training, as he had to do all of the movements in the bulky motion capture suit and helmet. Number 9. Let's talk about the way Na'vis move.
We have to go through not just climbing rocks, but also how to climb through the vines.
Ilram Choi had some major stunts to perform.
Jump from space to space.
While also staying true to the Na'vi movements.
He might be a hunter or he'll be a soldier.
They had him step in for several characters because he was one of the few to be able to hit all of the dangerous choreography in such a flawless manner.
He was even one of the amp suits that was being developed.
Sam Worthington had his own style of movements he and James Cameron based on his ability to surf.
When I started talking about flying the Banshees and the Leonopteryx like a board sport, like this kind of athletic thing,
he was able to get into it in a way that felt natural to him, while still maintain his Na'vi movement. Which brings us to our next point. Number 10. A lot of prep went into creating the Na'vi's fighting style.
We had to design not just the stunts, but also the movements that would be associated with the Na'vis.
They only had a month and a half to train the actors, so they had a lot to squeeze in. They had to design fight scenes specifically for those movements to shine through. Any choreographed scene that came off too human had to be reworked, which, naturally, required a lot of takes and a lot of patience.
It's a lot more difficult than I would have thought. We had to constantly be on them every day about how they were fighting.
Number 11. Even getting into character is dangerous. Every actor had to go through the life cast process, which they used to design the characters. Basically, they had to wear restrictive plastic all over their face, while another layer of plaster was poured over them. Going through this made it extremely difficult to hear, see, smell, and even breathe. Though a vigorous process, it was highly necessary as those designs get scanned into computer files to get made into what we eventually see on screen. Number 12. Things got really method for a few days.
We knew we were doing that.
James Cameron wanted to prepare his actors for shooting in an entirely CGI world.
Because we knew that ultimately we were going to wind up in a fully CG rainforest with fully CG characters, and it had to look real.
By taking them to the rainforest for reference. Needless to say, it definitely wasn't the most comfortable or safe experience for the crew. I took the actors on what I called a sense memory odyssey. We went to Kauai. We lived in the rainforest for a few days. We cooked in underground fire pits. We drank water from the leaves. He wanted them to bring those experiences back to the set. The way they placed their hands and feet when walking up a steep section, the sounds, the smells, and everything in between that could be utilized for the world of Avatar. Zoe Saldana said that those were the most physically demanding days of her life.
Just digging and climbing and muddy, and
especially because she had to wear her actual costume.
We're videotaping and we're going through the inside of this jungle.
Cap ready
And action!
If you're listening to this on your phone, you might want to hide it before James Cameron sees. Bad things happen to those on their phone. But if you are brave enough, we're looking at all the coolest secrets from the making of Avatar. Number 1. Did you realize Sigourney Weaver didn't just play a younger character in The Way of Water? It's true! She already technically was playing a younger character in the first movie. Perhaps you never noticed this little detail, but her avatar had been around for 18 years. So, it looks 18 years younger than Sigourney or even her human character, Grace.
Grace?
Well, who'd you expect, numbnuts? Creating her avatar was the toughest because her features did not translate well to the avatar design. And so the artist tasked with making her design brought in pictures of her from the movie Alien. Number 2. Let's start at the end. The end that never was, that is. The original ending of Avatar was going to see a pregnant Neytiri. We're kind of glad they didn't end it the cliche way, not gonna lie. The movie was already leaning on a ton of them, ones that had already gone out of style in the 90s, so it's for the best.
The forest will heal, so will the hearts of the people.
Number 3. He's coming. Supposedly, if your cell phone went off, James Cameron would nail gun them to a wall. He did that with like 20 apparently, right above the exit sign. Let that be a reminder to everyone to turn it off in theaters when The Way of Water comes out. Number 4. Where do you even begin when forming a language? Our guess is the little words like the. An entire language was created for the Na'vi from scratch by linguist Dr. Paul R. Frummer.
What were we going to establish, and then how was everyone else going to meet that criterion?
He was hired to develop a language that would be easy for actors to pronounce that didn't resemble any existing language. He created about 1,000 words. Zoe Saldana was in charge of creating the accent for the Na'vi in English, since she had to speak it the most. Sam Worthington said it was easier for him, an Australian, to master the Na'vi language than the American accent.
These guys were just going off.
Okay. Number 5. A wide range of training was necessary to get the actors militarized and then acclimated to nature. Sam Worthington, who plays Jake, actually had to do military boot camp to bring him closer to his character. He had to learn to use multiple different weapons. So someone came down and showed him what it's like to hold a gun and all the other things that would be associated with being a Marine. While Zoe had to move completely unhuman-like, right down to working with her bow, with her elbow bent backwards.
So we wanted them to have more of a animal kind of a movement.
Number 6. Where did Jurassic Park rip off all its dino noises from? The real thing?
But there is a Banshee language. It makes all kinds of different sounds, and those sounds mean different things.
Most of the sounds the animals make on Pandora are recycled noises from the Jurassic Park franchise. While the yipping and cackling sounds made by the viper wolves were real spotted hyena calls. Number 7. They could have bummed a smoke off of literally anybody. Why rely on tech? Just like almost everything else in this movie, Grace Augustine's cigarette is CGI. Honestly, we didn't see that one coming. Number 8. Not that kind of cast. Jake's atrophied legs were prosthetics cast from the legs of a paraplegic man with roughly the same bone structure as Sam. Sam Worthington's real legs were tucked into the wheelchair and digitally removed in post-production. Number 9. We feel the Na'vi should also have 6 limbs. All the Pandora animals have 6 limbs. It wasn't that simple to just add 2 extra legs to an Earth horse, though. They had to reimagine the anatomy of the characters, too. They all moved like ants. Their front 4 legs moved together, but the back 2 were separate. The multiple breathing orifices were inspired by air intakes on the sides of sports cars. We guess you can get your inspiration from anywhere.
What's the metaphor? What are we trying to say to the audience with every bone and sinew that we put into this creature?
Number 10. Make them different, but not so different that they aren't sexy. James Cameron took inspiration for the Na'vi from his mother, who had a dream about a tall blue woman. He drew a picture of it way back in high school, too. In designing Neytiri, one of the challenges was making her look alien, but also human enough that Jake's attraction to her isn't super off-putting. They went through a ton of designs.
I wanted people to say, I want to be one of them.
Number 11. How many movies can you think of really pushed advancements as much as Avatar? None? Avatar paved the way for tech in movies like we know it today. The Na'vi actors had cameras attached to helmets to capture intimate facial performances. They were able to see simple renderings of the CGI world while filming.
The actual facial capture is too complex to map onto these characters.
This movie was also the first to film using a 3D camera. Number 12. When writers write, often they include a character with a personality similar to their own. For James Cameron, that was Dr. Grace Augustine. Sigourney said, "I teased him because, to me, I'm playing Jim Cameron in the movie as this kind of brilliant, approach-driven, idealistic perfectionist. But that same somebody has a great heart underneath. So I have to say, I was always kind of channeling him." Number 13. Do you think the world was ready to handle something new?
How do you create music for a world that doesn't exist?
The music in Avatar was a new invention, meant to not be linked in any way to any culture. Homer noted, "I couldn't go off into some weird world and present a whole new scale system or a whole new theme system. I had to try to glue everything together. No matter how dense it is on the screen or how alien it might be, there is a thread in the music that keeps it grounded for the audience so they know what is going on and how to feel." Number 14. One day, Sam Worthington will release a book about his experience. Sam was living in his car at the time of his audition. The person who called him in for the audition told him nothing about the director or the script. He was disappointed at first, thinking it was another waste of time. Matt Damon and Jake Gyllenhaal were actually the studio's first choices to play Jake, but James Cameron wanted to cast the relatively unknown Sam.
I just wanted to say thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Number 15. Avatar is pretty ancient at this point. James Cameron promised not to take his pay as director if Avatar flopped. This was just one reassurance 20th Century Fox had that they wouldn't lose all their money. He originally planned to have the film completed for release in 1999, but the technology was just not advanced enough to tackle the project in a way that was financially reasonable. While a lot of people say Avatar is just Disney's Pocahontas, that isn't the full story. James had been developing Avatar since as far back as the 60s. He smushed 4 of his scripts together, and even some early concept art from high school. The first script being Xenogenesis, about scientists who try to find a new planet to live on. The second, Chrysalis, was about a man in a wheelchair who has all of his sensory inputs removed so he can journey through his own mind. The third, Mother, was about a company who sets up mines on other planets. The rest of the elements of the story went to his movie Alien. And the last one, Wind Warriors, was basically the plot of Avatar except set on Earth. In order to develop a fully realized world, it's easy to see why you need a team of highly skilled and super knowledgeable people to develop single aspects. Imagine trying to come up with the language, music, culture, creatures, and technology to capture it all yourself. It's an impossible task, unless you've got your master's degree in literally everything. Do you have those million-dollar ideas that are just so big you don't know where to start? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for hanging out with us here at The Things.